Hi there. Wally Vinton was the worst team leader in my trim shop. That was the consensus anyway. I was running the trim shop at Lansing Grand River Assembly, the section of the plant where Cadillacs got their interiors. Electrical harnesses, carpets, instrument panels, and all the exterior glass installed in a delicate dance between robots applying urethane and humans squeezing windshields and backlights into metal bodies. Hundreds of operations, thousands of potential failure points, and a team of local 652 UAW members who had to get every one of them right on the moving line. Wally was a team leader responsible for harness installation. So this is a spot where the vehicle comes down from the paint shop. You take this large wiring harness, all the wiring that goes in the car, and dump it into the car and slowly start pulling it to all parts where it moves in the undercarriage. And for months, this area was a disaster. Basically, the trim shop would be stopped right there at his first station, and we would hardly ever move. He would argue with supervision. He would cuss. He would stop the line, refuse to complete assignments, calling the committee man over every grievance he could manufacture. Management, my bosses, pulled me aside more than once. Why do you keep this guy? He's killing your numbers. I understood the frustration. His area was a mess. Downtime was high. His team was demoralized. The easy answer, the one American manufacturing has perfected over decades, was to write him up, document the pattern, use the shop rules, and push him out. Replace the problem, move on. But based on what we had heard about the Toyota system, based on what we got trained at Eisenach, something didn't sit right. Because Wally wasn't lazy. Lazy people coast. Lazy people do the minimum and disappear into the herd. Wally was loud. Wally was angry. Wally was stopping the line and demanding that someone pay attention. Now, that's not the behavior of someone who doesn't care. That's the behavior of someone who cares so much that it's coming out sideways. So instead of writing him up, I went to the floor. Not to lecture, to listen and see. And what I heard and saw changed how I think about manufacturing. Truthfully, the harness installation area was a disaster, but not because of Wally's team. The harnesses themselves were the problem. They arrived from the supplier taped so thick with protective wrapping that installers were cutting their hands trying to unwrap them. The tape adhesive left residue that made the connectors difficult to seat. Paint from the body shop and the paint shop was filling locator holes that the harness clips needed to snap into. And the rubber grommets that scaled the harness pass-throughs, they were spec'd so tight that pushing them into the floor holes required enough force to cause repetitive strain injuries. The funniest thing was when Wally would teach me the word durometer, which is a measure of stiffness of rubber. I was the mechanical engineer. Wally was a UAW local 652 team leader, and he taught me what durometer meant. Wally's team wasn't failing. They were fighting a war against upstream problems that nobody had fixed because nobody had listened to the people who encountered them 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. Wally knew every one of those problems. He could describe them with engineering precision. He knew which paint booth was overspray filling which holes. He knew which harness part numbers had the worst tape adhesive. He knew exactly how many seconds each rubber grommet added to cycle time and how many team members were developing wrist pain and serious ergonomic injuries. He had the diagnosis. What he did not have, what no one had ever given him, was any reason to believe that sharing it would matter. Wally had come from other UAW plants where you learn fast, don't speak up, don't suggest, don't stop the line unless you want a target on your back. Plants where the implicit contract between labor and management was simple. We pay you to do what you're told, not to think. In those environments, intelligence didn't disappear. It goes underground. It becomes cynicism, or rage, or quiet disengagement. The system gets exactly what it incentivizes: compliance without contribution, bodies without brains. So when Wally arrived at Lansing Grand River, he tested us. His belligerence wasn't defiance. It was a diagnostic. He was probing whether this plant was any different from the ones that had taught him to stop caring. Every argument, every grievance, every time he stopped the line, he was asking a question he'd never say out loud. Will anyone here actually listen? What happened next took months. It wasn't pretty, and it changed everything I believe about manufacturing leadership. And I'll tell you the full story as we go along. So for months, management's answer was to see a problem employee. My answer, once I understood what I was looking at, had to be different. The turnaround didn't happen in one conversation. There was no Hollywood moment where I gave an inspiring speech and Wally saw the light. It took months of sustained, unglamorous effort, and it required management, me, to eat crow. Lots of it. I had to overcome my own distaste for a guy on the floor who was talking back to supervision, cussing out engineers, making my metrics look bad, definitely make me look bad because the trim shop was a bottleneck of the whole plant. That's hard. Every instinct in a plant manager says, control the disruption. But if I controlled Wally, I'd lose the intelligence. So we brought him support. I brought him support. Not platitudes, actual support. I brought the paint shop supervisors to Wally's area and made them sit together over the overspray problem. I brought the harness supplier's design engineer to the floor, not to a conference room, to the actual workstation, and had Wally show him what the tape was doing to his team's hands. I brought maintenance engineering to look at the grommet tooling and asked them to redesign the insertion fixtures. Each time, the message was the same. You're the team leader. You see these problems every day. You have the ability to fix it. We will support you. Each time, Wally tested whether the support was real. Would the paint shop actually change their boot settings? Would the supplier actually redesign the tape? Would engineering actually build new tooling? Each time, when the answer was yes, slowly, grudgingly, with plenty of setbacks, something shifted. Wally's light turned on. Not all at once, not dramatically, more like a dimmer switch being turned up over weeks. He stopped filing grievances and started filing, get this, engineering change requests. He stopped cussing out supervisors and started pulling them to the floor to show them what he'd found. He stopped stopping the line in protest and started stopping the line to fix root causes. He organized his team. He built relationships with the paint shop, with harness design, with the grommet supplier, problem by problem, station by station, they solved it. Within 6 months, Wallace area had the lowest downtime in the entire trim shop. The trim shop stopped being the bottleneck of the launch. We got out of the way. Thank you, Wally. Read that again. The worst team leader, the one management wanted to fire, was running the best area in the shop. Same person, same paycheck, same UAW contract. The only thing that had changed was that someone finally treated his intelligence as an asset instead of a threat. And it didn't stop with Wally. His team members watched what happened. They watched a team leader go from being written off to being listened to. They watched engineering actually show up on the floor. They watched problems that had been ignored for months get solved in weeks. And they started bringing their own observations forward. The guy on station 12 who'd noticed that a particular clip design failed twice as often in cold weather. The woman on the glass line who'd figured out that the urethane robots were applying adhesive 3 millimeters off center on the driver's side. Intelligence that had been sitting dormant, suppressed by years of being told to just do your job, started surfacing across the whole area. One Wally became 5, then 10. The trim shop didn't just improve, it transformed. Here is what haunts me about Wally Vinton's story, and I'm writing about it 20 years later. Remember, it's still fresh. Wally's intelligence was always there. On the day he was the worst team leader in the trim shop, he already had the diagnosis for every problem in his area. He already knew which upstream processes were causing failures. He already had the relationships with his team members to mobilize a fix. All of that capability was present, fully formed, drawing a full paycheck. And none of it was being used. Think about this in the language I use when I sit in on venture capital pitches. Wally's brain, 86 billion neurons, a quadrillion potential synaptic connections, and an exaflop, I can't even say this right, an exaflop of processing power running on 20 watts was being utilized at maybe 30% capacity. The 30% that follows instructions, shows up on time, and installs harnesses per the standard work. The other 70%, the pattern recognition, the systems thinking, the diagnostic capability, the leadership, was stranded. Not because it didn't exist, because the system had decided it wasn't wanted. We had purchased an exaflop processor and were running it at spreadsheet macro level. When I finally asked Wally what he wanted solved, I wasn't creating intelligence. I was activating intelligence that was already there, already paid for, just waiting for a system that would let it operate. American manufacturing is full of Wallys, team leaders and operators and technicians who see problems every day that management can't see from a conference room, who carry decades of pattern recognition in their hands and in their instincts, who stopped offering solutions years ago because no one listened, no one changed anything, and eventually you learn to protect yourself by shutting up. The cost of that silence is incalculable. Not just in downtime and scrap and quality escapes, though those costs are real and enormous. The deeper cost is that companies are spending billions on automation and AI to replace the very intelligence they suppressed. They're building inferior robotic substitutes for capabilities that are already standing at the production line, already hired, already trained, already drawing a paycheck, already paid for. I think about Wally every time I see a headline about humanoid robots replacing factory workers. Every time a CEO announces that AI will eliminate 30% of their workforce. Every time a consulting firm publishes a study on the ROI of automation. I want to ask them, did you try asking your Wally what they see? Did you bring him the paint shop supervisor? Did you sit on the floor and listen to what the tape adhesive is doing to their hands? Or did you just decide they were the problem and start shopping for a replacement? Wally Vinton is retired now, somewhere in Lansing. I'd love to find him. I'd love to put a microphone in front of him and let him tell this story in his own words. Because his version, believe me, would be better than mine. Angrier, funnier. He'd given me a lot of special Indian names, but mostly more profane and more true. But even without his voice, the lesson stands. Every plant in America has Wallies. People whose intelligence has been stranded by systems that never asked for it. The most expensive waste in manufacturing is not scrap, is not downtime, is not warranty. It's the human capability you've already paid for and are refusing to use. The light was always on. We just have to stop blocking it.